Okay, so this is Evil Tonelab, or File Note Lab if you prefer, which is a modular performance or sound design or what have you application written in MaxMSP. It's based upon or inspired by a thing called Framework that Leafcutter John shared a few years ago, and it uses Alex Harker's dynamic DSP objects, which means that you can load and unload modules on the fly without breaking the signal chain. What we've got is a series of B patches, these little squares or B patches, which can be loaded and unloaded dynamically using these menus here. We have 9 up here which I've called generators, which are audio processing and audio generating modules. So that could be anything from little loop players and effects modules, filters, all that kind of thing. So there are 9 of those here, and they are loaded by these 9 menus here, and they are mixed via this 9x9 matrix mixer here, which means that the outputs of any one of these modules can be put into the inputs of any of the others. These are all stereo in, stereo out, by the way. So they can be mixed in a very flexible arrangement. Down here we have a row of 6 modulators. Modulators send, unsurprisingly, modulation data. You can think of it a bit like sort of control voltages in an analog synth, and they're the obvious sort of things like LFOs, envelope generators, ADSRs, that kind of thing. And these are selected by these 6 menus here. And over here are 3 what I've called modules, which are sort of MIDI input and MIDI generation modules. These don't use any audio objects, any tilde objects. They generate a 2-element list, sort of like MIDI, so they're ideal for sort of creating note and controller type data. So the generators and the modulators, because they use tilde objects, signal objects, they are all using the dynamic DSP objects. The module units here don't use dynamic DSP. I'll explain a bit later why that difference is quite important. Let's just have a look at the thing. Oh, up here as well I missed out. There is a mixer for external patches. So if you've got another max patch, you can bring it in here. There's a little patch that you can drop into your max patch, which will announce its presence when it's loaded in these menus up here. These menus up here can also be used obviously for your physical inputs from your audio device. So at the moment I've got this microphone is going in through ADC1. If I was to, example, bring up the level here on, what's this, module 7 here, 1 2 1 2, we'll get a nice bouncy delay on it. Let's just initialize the system and load some stuff and see how it works. So the initialize button is up here. If I press this, it will ask me if I really want to do this. OK, and it's emptied all the modules now. So we're starting from scratch here. It should also initialize the mixer here. Let's just press that initialize button. Right, everything's down. So let's start by loading something like a loop player. And you notice obviously when that was being loaded, there was no disturbance to the signal chain. I can still keep talking through it. Let's set a folder for this thing to choose samples from. As always, choose some Apple loops. Can't go wrong with Apple loops. drums. Right, you'll notice that the whole thing is clocked by a central transport system here. If I want to, I can use certain modules to set the basic tempo for the entire system. So for example, if I was to load, let's just play this thing first so we can hear what it's. Right, I reckon we've got 16 beats there. The clock here is set to eighth notes here. Let's just set this to quarter notes. And I reckon we've got 16 of them. So if I now click set tempo, it's giving us our 125 BPM. That means that anything like the modulation data and the sequences and so on loaded in here will now be set to that tempo. So let's put some effects in. Let's load. It doesn't matter where, as I say, because of the sort of flexibility of this matrix, they can be loaded in any particular order. Let's stick it in number 5. Let's put a filter in. We've got state variable filter. Where's that? SVF. There we are. Okay, so that's module 5. Let's bring up its output here. Let's set some parameters, so frequency, whatever, bit of resonance, whoops. Low pass we'll have it at. Set it to 24 dB per octave. And if we now set the output of module 1 into module 5, so we're coming down this column here, these are the outputs, out of 1 into 5. So now play it again. So you can hear that's going through there. Okay, just to make things simpler here, certain of the modules can have the, if I click this button here, then it's linked to the spacebar, so I can start it by hitting the spacebar. Right, let's get some modulation data in. Let's get an LFO, of course. So now this will be clocked to this tempo here, so whenever I set it to, let's set it to sine wave. If I now send this modulation data is sent and received using a system of U menus. So if I send this as modulator 1, I can pick it up here as modulator 1, and now if I play it, there's a little scope up here so you can view modulation data if you want. You can set this to whatever. At the moment it defaults to modulator 1. And obviously I can change the rate of it with respect to this tempo here. So at the moment it's going once per bar. If I change this to, let's slow it down a bit. Okay, so I mentioned bringing in other max patches to the system. They come in via this mixer here. I've got a couple of other patches opened, ones which I prepared earlier. And basically to prepare them, all I need to do is to drop in this little patch here, NL name sender, and hook it up to the output of the patch. So we've got a little mono synth here. I've actually given this a separate send here, an effects send, but it could just be coming out of the main patch output. So when this patch is put into another max patch, when the patch is opened, it will send its name to this mixer here. So what you will see is that in my menu here, that patch Spectrum 3.2 has been added there, so I can now bring that in to this row of the matrix here, and if I bring it up as I've done already, input number 5, so it's going into module number 5, which is that filter. I can play that. So that's coming into the system, and likewise I've also opened up another patch here. We've got Twin Pusher, which also has that name sender patch in it. So again, if I open this up on the, if I bring it in here, let's go Twin Pusher there, let's bring up input number 5 again, and if I go back to Twin Pusher and play it, right. The Patra implementation is not particularly extensive. I've deliberately done that to try and encourage it as a kind of, I don't know, a platform for experimentation rather than sort of entering sort of repeatable things all the time. So what you can save in Patra is setups which consist of the B patches loaded and the configurations of the matrix. Within the B patches, the only thing which is saved as part of a setup is any of these sends and receives, basically so that you've got the whole kind of routing thing saved as part of a setup, but all these other parameters are not actually saved. So I can recall, let's see, I think I've got something loaded into number 3 here, and it loads this bunch of modules here. You'll notice that the matrix itself, the state of the matrix have been restored as well. So you can save sort of just basic sort of setups. Another thing which is worth noting is that as well as your own modules, and I'll come on to how to develop your own modules in a minute, you can, there's a couple of modules here for loading VST, so you can use VST plugins in the system. There's a separate one for VST instruments, like this one here, and there's another one, just VST effects. So, yeah. In the case of the VST effects and the VST instruments, if you load something, let's load this little clav, and you click this get parameter button, it will load their VST parameters into the menus here, which then become targets for modulation. So let's just well, manual, let's try that. So if I load a patch into here, let's just send, I'll just show you basically how the sort of send and receive system works with MIDI, which is the same, exactly the same sort of thing as with modulation data. If I load into here, let's do the most basic, which is just simple MIDI input. So there's a MIDI input module here. I select my device up here, and I send, so a note data, I could do it by filter it by channel if I wanted to, just leave it on Omni. If I send that as MIDI 1, and I pick this up here as MIDI 1, where's MIDI input here, yeah, I can now play this VST instrument here. If we, let's just modulate some of that data just to show that it can be done. If I again set this to a sine wave, set this to modulation 1, set this here to modulation 1, bring up the level here, that's better. The module development, will create a separate video explaining how to do this, but just a quick sort of preview. There is a dev folder in Evil Tonelab folder. There's this dev folder here which has templates for the different types of modules. Simplest one is the modules because it contains no audio objects, so it doesn't use dynamic DSP. So you've literally got a template here, you build your patch in here, save it as whatever into the modules folder, click the refresh menus button and it'll appear in these menus here and you can load it up. The other modules, the generators and modulators, because they use dynamic DSP, they have two separate parts. They have a GUI, which user interface, which is what you see here, which is loaded into the B patches, and you have a hidden part which is loaded into the dynamic DSP. Just so you can see that, take this module 1 here. There's a little thing down here saying open slot number. What that does is open the dynamic DSP slot. So loaded into slot number 1 is this FMPD thing. So if I go to number 1, that's basically the hidden part of this patch. Actually, the whole of it is in here, in this audio process here. Open it up, that's basically the patch within there. That's what does the business, as it were. The way these two things are linked up, it's all done by scripting at the time that they're loaded, but what this means is when you're developing your modules here for either generators or modulators, you actually make two different patches. Quickly show you that. So I go to this dev folder. So for generators, there is generator GUI template here and the core template here. The GUI is obviously these B patches, the bit that you see. The core is the bit that's loaded into dynamic DSP. And I've made these templates so the process is pretty painless. And basically you open you build it all initially in the GUI template. So here is the template. You would build it in here, you'd put any audio parts you'd put in this sub patch here, audio process. The GUI stuff would appear in this window here, and they're linked via puck and in here root. So for example, you notice here there's a one labeled mod for modulation, and corresponding in here there's a root mod, so that data would appear here. So basically you build the whole thing in this window, and then when you're done you take this, cut it and paste replace it into a core template. So you basically paste replace that audio process bit and save the two things as the way I've done it by convention. If I was to save this as foo, the GUI part, then the core part would be foo core, and you drop those particular patches in the appropriate folders. And again, just like with the module thing here, if you were to refresh the menu, it will then appear at the end of the list. There's a numbering system I've used here. The reason for that is simply that in order to, because the way the loading and saving of B patches depends on what's in these U menus here, in order not to mess up any pre-saved configurations, you want to add any new modules at the end of the list. The simplest way to do that is to give them a number. So basically, if I was to create a new modulator, at the moment I've got 6 in this menu, I would, whatever I was going to call it, I would call it 07, whatever I was going to call it. Then that means that any sort of previously saved patch of states wouldn't be messed up by the addition of the new module. Okay, so there it is. Have fun.